Hello, and welcome to our Q&A on our Stayers and Leavers report. This is coming out of the Center for Innovation and Sustainability in Local Media. It's sort of a follow-up to a report that we had done previously on burnout among local journalists. This project is a really important part of one of the founding pillars, I guess, of sustainability that we believe in. So we just wanted to share a mission statement to just show what we're for. So this is our mission statement. We believe in a more equitable and sustainable future for local news, the journalists who make it, and the communities that need it. So this part of our research, both the Burnout Project, the work that we've done on unions that you can also find on our website, and this current project are focusing on the journalists who make local news. So without further ado, I'll introduce the project itself. So this project is called Stayers and Leavers in U.S. Local Journalism. It was a response to what we saw in the Burnout Report, which you can also find on our website. In that report, we surveyed over 500 local journalists across the U.S., and we found that about 70% of the respondents experienced personal and work-related burnout. So that was a very high number. We also noticed that the people who experienced high rates of burnout were disproportionately women and younger people. And so we were interested in what that all means. Burnout is a word that's been used a lot. Burnout is a concept that's been talked about a lot, but how do people work through burnout? Does it lead them to leaving the industry or that job, or is there a way to find resilience? Are there certain organizations that might encourage resilience, or are there different ways of thinking about work that could help people stay? So the idea and the goal of this current study is to understand the factors that go into journalists' choices to stay and their choices to leave, whether it's burnout or layoffs, or just looking for a better work-life balance or salary. These are all important things for us to understand as we go forward and craft a sustainable future for not just journalism, but journalists as well, because they're part of that future. If you're interested in taking this survey, you're eligible if you are a local journalist, if you've been a local journalist and you're not anymore, or if you have attended journalism school. So there's kind of three paths here, and as we go through this survey, we'll explain the different paths. Depending on what you choose in the survey, you'll be asked different questions. But those are the three groups that we wanted to study here. So people who maybe went to journalism school and decided not to go into local journalism, we want to understand why. And then also people who are local journalists who are continuing to work in local journalism. We want to understand what's keeping them there, whether it's the organization they're at or other factors such as maybe their belief in the work that they're doing. And we also want to understand the people who worked in local journalism and decided to leave, what factors went into those decisions as well. The results from this report will be put out in either late spring or early summer of this year. They'll include findings and recommendations for individual journalists, as well as news organizations and support organizations. The questions in this study ask a variety of things, from where people are going to from journalism, what kind of careers are they going towards, as well as information on salary, both what people are making right now and what they're making in their careers outside of journalism, and other questions related to burnout and factors that could make people leave. That we have a whole list of them that we'll get to as we move forward to the survey. So this is the survey, and here's a QR code. You can use your phone to get to the survey, or I also linked it in the presentation for myself. So when you get to the survey, the first thing you're going to see is this very, very long consent page. So this study has been approved by the University Ethics Board at UNC, and we're required to give some information on the study. It can be a kind of lengthy page, but basically this page is just giving you information about research studies in general. Your participation in the study is always 100% voluntary. If you start taking the survey and you decide you don't want to continue, you do not have to finish the survey. You're more than welcome to just X out of that window and not complete it. It also explains the purpose of this study, which is to understand the factors that lead people to stay or leave local journalism, as we explained before. We also explain what makes you eligible for this survey, which are those three paths that we talked about before. You are a local journalist, you have been a local journalist, or you attended an accredited journalism school. Reasons to not participate in the study are you're not in one of those three groups. This study should take 20 minutes at most. I would say most people are hovering around the 10 to 15 minute range. So it's very doable. You are also able to take part of the survey and come back to it. The link that is on our social media and also on our website will save your position. So if you were taking the survey, say you're a working journalist and some breaking news pops up, you're able to handle that and come back to the survey. If you do take part in the survey, there are a couple of questions that you're going to be asked. These different criteria are just some of the things that you will be asked. So you'll be asked about salary, whether you work in local journalism, your feelings about the journalism industry, your experience with burnout, online harassment, the size of the media outlet that you work at and its scope, and then also some demographic information about your age, gender, sexual orientation, and race. If you don't feel comfortable with any of these questions, none of them are required. You're able to leave them blank. So if you don't want to give information about your media outlet or your gender or your sexual orientation, that is completely fine. The benefit of participating in this study is that we're able to produce research that will get results. Something that we saw with our burnout report that came out in May was a huge response from not only journalists who felt seen and heard from what we were finding, but also from support organizations that have organized workshops and trainings for leaders in the industry. So we all gain from your participation. And the more people that we have who participate in this survey from all media, from all walks of life, all ages, and races and all other aspects, it will only make our findings better. And it will hopefully lead to some kind of change in the way that things are working in the industry. Risks of participating in this survey. Most of the risk comes from deductive disclosure of your identity from your participation. We do a couple of things to mitigate this, including we do not report any results for subgroups of 10 or fewer people. And we are very mindful of any kind of cross tabulations that get too small and too narrow where your identity could possibly be identified. We also purposefully did not ask certain questions, such as questions about geography. So we wouldn't be able to deduct information about you. Also, this survey is completely anonymous. We do not collect any data about your contact information or anything like that. So your information is pretty safe and pretty anonymous. The team is also only comprised of a few people who are able to access this data. It will be password protected. And everyone who is dealing with this data has gone through training that's consistent with the ethics code for the University of North Carolina. Again, we're not collecting your email information, so you personally will not receive the results of this study. Definitely follow our social media accounts and keep an eye out for the report that will be coming out, as I said, in either late spring or early summer. I went over how your information will be protected, and I have mentioned before that you're able to withdraw from this study. There's no cost to being in this study, and if you have any questions, my email is here. It's just my first name, with a period, my last name at unc.edu. You'll be able to find my information also on CISLM's website or on my social media. If there's any questions that you have about the survey, we're more than happy to answer any questions. This survey is really supposed to be for the journalists who are taking it. So it's really important to us that your voices are heard. And even if there are things that we haven't considered in this study, we'll absolutely keep your input in mind going into further research that we're doing. Okay, so that's everything on the consent page. Now we'll be going to the survey. So as I mentioned, there are different paths or different kind of personas who could be taking this survey. I'm going to start off with people who have worked in local journalism. So there's skip logic in this survey, which means that some questions, the way that you answer them dictates the rest of the questions that you will see in the survey. So if you say yes to if you've worked in local journalism, these are the questions that you're going to see. Questions about how long you worked in local journalism. And this is, we've asked for years just so that we can account, maybe especially when we're looking at salary, if there are big differences in the numbers that we're seeing. If maybe salaries were from, a couple of years ago when a certain number might have had a bigger impact in your spending power. You have the option to add in career breaks. So if you left journalism at some point and came back, you can add in any information here. Then questions about why you chose to work in local journalism and if you still work in local journalism. So whether you still work in local journalism is an important question to answer because that's also going to lead you to the question specifically for people who work in local journalism. So let's say in this case, yes, we still do work in local journalism. Then here we have the option to add our salary. This is in fives, so just round to the nearest. If you make $42,000, you can choose 40. If you make $45,000, that's easy. So just use rounding. And then you can choose if you're a full-time or a freelancer. And this question asks about how large your outlet is. If you're not fully sure, that's okay. Just make your best guess. For medium, we're looking for the primary medium of your outlet. So of course, nowadays, there are a lot of newspapers and also TV stations that also post on digital. But if you work for a newspaper, you would choose newspaper, even though your newspaper does have a digital presence. If you're working for a digital online only news outlet, that's when you would choose digital. And then same for television and radio. So if your outlet's main medium is television or radio, that's what you'll be choosing. And for scope, choose the scope of your outlet, not of your beat. So if your beat is City Hall, but you work for an outlet that covers the whole region, you would choose regional. For the union question, we're just interested in whether your news outlet has a union. If you're not sure or you can't remember, you're more than welcome to choose that. And again, if there are questions that you feel uncomfortable answering, you can also skip those questions. Here we're asking if you've ever thought of leaving journalism, and there's an opportunity to elaborate on that. If you don't want to elaborate, you don't have to, but the opportunity is there if you want to add a little bit more input. And then we have some short responses here where if you were to leave journalism, what is the most likely reason why? It doesn't have to be an essay or a really long explanation. You can even just put a sentence or two here. And here, do you see yourself staying in journalism for the next 5 years? None of us have a magic orb to look into the future, but just whatever you feel right now. This is a guess here, or an estimation on how much you think you spend working at your journalism job. It doesn't have to be exact. I would just take an average. Of course, we all have more intense week and less intense weeks, but what do you think it looks like on average? And here's a question about burnout. Now, this is just kind of tying it back to the previous report that we had done. burnout, as defined in the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory, which we used for that report, there are three aspects of it, which include personal burnout, work-related burnout, and source-related or reader-related burnout. So we're asking about those three different categories. You can choose as many of those as apply to you. And if none of them apply to you, you're more than welcome to also say none of the above. These are general categories in this question asking about your job category. If you don't see your job, you can also mark other. You can also select all that apply, since we know there are people who do multiple roles in a newsroom. If you're dealing with harassment, this is again a kind of average. So if you deal with harassment almost never, you can choose rarely. But if you every once in a while experience online harassment once every 3 months, and then there are more options for if you experience harassment more than that. And this is a scale of just how confident you feel about the future of journalism, ranging from very confident to not very confident at all. And this, we also want to hear about the great parts of your experience as a local journalist. And so we want to know about your favorite part, what made it worth it for you. And that can be anything. It could be anything from colleagues to the work that you were doing. So again, this doesn't have to be a very long response, just maybe even 1 or 2 sentences works just great. These final questions: how do you view the profession of journalist? We're interested, there's past research on how people view this either job or vocation. So we're interested in what you think. And this question, what does a sustainable career in local journalism look like to you, is really important to us, especially as we're thinking about sustainability in terms of what it looks like for journalists. And we've seen, even in the responses that we've seen so far, it could be a number of different things, from the ability to have career growth, to specific things that you have experienced in your career that is sustainable. And we're also interested in how important salary is to you, so you are able to mark that on this scale. These are some ideas that we had of things that would impact how you see your career as a journalist. You're able to choose any one of these and multiple of these responses that range from layoffs to AI to the COVID pandemic. And you also have the option to write in something else if there's something that we missed. And then we ask how any of the above impacted how you saw your work as a local journalist. And again, this is one of those responses where you're free to write as little or as much as you would like. Finally, we're interested in what you majored in college, just have an idea of the kinds of people who work in journalism, where they're coming from. And then here are some demographic questions. This is your age and yours, just choose one of the options. Whether you identify as transgender, you can prefer not to disclose your gender, race, and ethnicity, and sexual orientation, as well as disability for which you get work accommodations. So that is the end of the journey of the person who has worked in local journalism. You would choose to submit, and that would be the end of the survey. So to go back to the other paths that you could take, you would go through the consent page once again. And then this time, in our next path that we're going to take is someone who has worked in local journalism but does no longer work in local journalism. So you would say yes. Did you ever work in local journalism? Yes. You would say how long you did and the reasons why. And then for do you still work in local journalism, you would say no. And then there are lots of reasons why someone might no longer work in local journalism. These are just a couple of them. If your reason for leaving local journalism is not there, you can add it in the other section. Opportunity to add your salary when you left journalism. If you don't remember, leave it blank. And then your salary now. These are similar questions to the ones that were for the stayers. So the size of your last outlet, the medium of your last outlet. I just chose this by accident, but that's fine. The scope of the last outlet that you worked at, and the union status of that outlet. And once again, these are similar to the questions that the stayers had, questions about how long you worked, about burnout and your job category, and online harassment. Also, we're asking about how you feel about the future of journalism and your favorite part of working in journalism. These again are similar. They're the same questions that the journalism stairs were asked. Again, you have the opportunity to choose any of the above that apply to you and to fill in a potential reason to question your career in journalism in the other column. And you can elaborate in this text box. Yeah, and these are the same questions, so we don't need to go over them again, but that's what it would look like if you were a journalism leaver. And the final path would be someone who went to an accredited journalism school but did not work in local journalism. So for the first question, did you ever work in local journalism? You would say no. And then there's a question asking if you considered working in local journalism. So we would love for you to elaborate. If you have nothing to elaborate, that's fine. But you can say, yes, I considered working in local journalism. And then you go back to that last page that we had seen previously for the other participants. So just your college major and then demographic information. So that is it for the survey. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my email is elizabeth.thompson@unc.edu. I definitely should have put that in the presentation. But we are really grateful for anyone who participates in this study. And we're really hoping that this can be a great resource for everyone in this ecosystem.